Yeah, so today I'll be talking about what it's like being a chemist and how that's generally perceived when you think of what a chemist does and some of the things that I've actually experienced, right? So one of the things is the name, right? You go to Guilford, everyone's named on a first name basis. And I try to introduce myself that way to my colleagues and even to my students. But it doesn't always work. So I'm known as, can you go to the next slide? So they call me Dr. Darko, right? And you know, to me that sounds very sinister. Go ahead and click, right? Sounds like I'm an evil scientist, yeah, you know, in the lab and doing some crazy stuff, right? I show this to my students, and I always ask, you know, what's he missing? He's missing something here, right? And go ahead and click it. And he needs safety glasses, right? So I'm an evil scientist, but at least I'm a safe evil scientist, and I'm looking at an exothermic reaction there, right? And so what do you think of when you think of a chemist, right? Am I this crazy guy mixing chemicals, different colors and stuff, or, you know, am I in a lab making illegal substances? Can everybody see that in Breaking Bad? Or, that's what everybody thinks. Everyone asks me, do I make meth? I'm like, come on, right? And some of that is true. A lot of what I do is working, not the meth. We do spend a lot of our time in the lab mixing chemicals, and sometimes there are color changes. But we might not look like what you think a chemist does, right? And this is a typical laboratory. And I'm going to show you pictures throughout this presentation, and I'll try as much as possible to give you, like, these are actual pictures that I took of a lab or of people, right? So this is a chemistry lab. And, you know, here are some of the glassware that I use, and their sinks and stuff. But what if I told you it was also somewhat of a weight room, right? Somewhat of a place where there's a lot of physical activity, okay? So here's an example. These guys are carrying some solvents, some liquids that we use in our reactions. And this is a 20-liter container. It's about 5 gallons. And depending on what's in it, it can weigh about 60 pounds, right? And we usually have this, you know, close to us so we don't have to carry this back and forth. But when that supply runs out, you've got to go down the hall and get another one of these and haul it back into your lab. And you do this enough times, you might end up with some big guns like these guys, all right? So, you know, again, this is going to be the general theme. Some of the things you don't think a chemist does, but really it was part of my daily life. Right? And this was a lot of what I did in graduate school. Okay? And this is my cardio. I went up and down stairs a lot, had to take samples from one place to another to get them analyzed. Yeah, I stayed in great shape because I did this a lot. And also, you know, the addition of some weightlifting as well. And sometimes we have compressed gas containers that we have to open, and sometimes they're stuck. So you go ask one of those big guys that are around in the lab to open them for you. And those guys I showed previously, they're actual graduate students. You know, I didn't just pick some muscle guys in the weight room. And they're really intelligent guys too. So again, kind of the different perceptions of what a scientist looks like and what we do. All right. Here are some of the glassware and the tools that I use in the lab. I won't go into explaining what each of these does, but you know, you might not have seen, you know, some of these things before as a layman's person, right? But what if I told you these are also my tools? I use mallets, WD-40, screws and nuts and bolts. Duct tape's always useful to have around the lab, right? Have around anywhere, really, duct tape. Aluminum foil. I've actually used aluminum foil to solve some problems or make apparatuses. And boxes, you know? I've actually used a box as part of my instrument, so to speak, for some of the things that I do. Right? So it's also, you know, it can be very blue collar. I wash a lot of dishes, right? You don't really think of that, but I dirty my glassware, I run reactions in them, and somebody's got to do it, and that's me. And a lot of my time is spent washing dishes. And we've come up with very clever ways to get them done pretty quickly. All right. Okay, this is exciting. We also do magic. Can everybody see this? Can you see the color there? I get excited by this. I don't know if you may, but go ahead and play it. And the color's gone. Right? What we do might seem like magic. And it really is. This might seem like a pretty simple thing, but a reaction just happened in the blink of an eye. All right? And this was a reaction that I was a part of as a postdoc. Right? And these kind of reactions that take place at really, really high rates can actually be used for some cool applications, right? When I'm talking about my work, you always want a buzzword. So this had cancer treatment applications. That's all you need to know, right? Chemists, we do cancer. Okay, so chemistry can also be, organic chemistry can also be very visual, okay? You don't think of us as artists, but we actually use a lot of visual components in our lectures to try to convey that information to students. Go ahead and, so something didn't happen, that's okay. But I wanted to point at these kind of hieroglyphic symbols over here, right? These are actually representations. These are all the same thing, okay? And we've come up with pretty clever ways to depict three-dimensional objects on a 2D surface, all right? So these are some of the subtle things that we do as instructors, as teachers, to try to convey that information, right? And it's not really seen as an art form, but we kind of take it for granted. These structures are incredibly difficult to draw as a student, and sometimes they can come up with some funky drawings of them, but we take it for granted. It just looks like lines and sticks and stuff, but it can be complex in terms of its thought and how it's represented. Right, and on that same vein, click it again, yeah. So we understand the need to visually represent some of the research that we do, all right? And so these are actual covers of journal articles of research that, scientists do, right? And to try to get your point across, we use a lot of visual imagery, okay? You have to be a good writer. And, part of what I got out of a Guilford education is the writing portion of it. I did not really like to write. I did not like that part of it. But once I got to graduate school, I had to step up over my colleagues because I knew how to construct a sentence well. And how it works in graduate school, at least with my professor, she would send me a draft. Or no, I would send her a first draft, and then she'd just tear it apart, right? Mine still got torn apart, but much less so than my other colleagues, right? So yeah, so these are actually publications in journals that I wrote along with some collaborators and other people. Go ahead. And also, so along that line, I've worked with some diverse colleagues and diverse, groups of people, graduate students, some postdocs as well. And so here in this picture, for example, you're going to be doing a lot of clicking. I like to use animation. Is that all right? Is that cool? Yeah. All right, cool. So, for example, this guy's from India. All right, click again. She's from Jamaica. These guys are from Jersey, which could be another country in itself if you've ever been there. And go ahead and click, and then the rest should come up on their own. All right. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people from all of these countries, and that's something that at Guilford we are. That's okay. You can stay up there. It's actually quite diverse population here, and we take that for granted, that we get to interact with people from all corners of the world, all right? So being here prepared me for these kind of interactions that I also took advantage of later in graduate school and as a postdoc and now as an assistant professor, all right? And challenges are now different. So I spent a lot of time in the lab as a graduate student and a postdoc, but as an assistant professor, it's very, very different. Go ahead and click. So I actually do a lot of public speaking. I talk about my work. I travel to a lot of places, to conferences, to other universities. I have to network. I have to schmooze to try to get my name out of there, to promote myself. And I collaborate with folks from, you know, different universities in the States and also abroad as well. All right, I do a lot of grant writing now. I'm sitting in my office a lot, researching where the money is going to come from, how it works. Well, I won't go into all those details, but I have to write a lot as well. And I've been giving a surprisingly large sum of money to organize and to try to get my lab and my research up and running. And I have to manage all of that as well. And I have graduate students, and I have to manage them. I'm a people manager. I have to try to motivate them to do the work. All that heavy lifting, they're going to do it now. I have to get them excited about that. And that's completely different to what I did as a graduate student, as a postdoc. Oh, I do a little bit of teaching too, right? Okay, so go ahead and click. And we're used to, you know, smaller classrooms here at Guilford, and this is my class, and this is not even a full class, right? I teach 150 students, okay? And so my first day, I was like, holy smokes, you know, I have to teach all of these kids. And it's so hard as an organic chemist to try to keep them engaged, to keep 150 kids listening to you the whole time. And, you know, with the technology these days, their attention span is very, very short. I only have them for 5 minutes, and then they're back on their smartphones or on their computers, all right? What I'm trying to say with all of this thing is that I've come across different challenges, different skills that I didn't think a chemist did, right? But that was okay, because at Guilford, I was exposed to a number of different subjects, a number of different ways of thinking, different ways to solve problems, and that helped prepare me that helped prepare me to adapt to some of these challenges and to figure things out as I went along. All right, and I don't think I could have done as good of a job as I did if I hadn't come to Guilford. All right, so. Are there any students there? It doesn't look like there are any students. This presentation was for the students. None of them are here. All right, but you're a student.
I just graduated, man.
You just finished.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to talk to you. I'll talk to you. So whatever your profession is, right, whatever you think you're going to do, that might change. But you're lucky. You're at Guilford, and you've learned how to look at things in different ways, right? You're reaping the benefits of a liberal arts education. And I took that for granted. I didn't like to write a lot. But yes, you're lucky. And whatever challenges you face, I believe that you'll be able to adapt to those challenges and those new skills that come along the way. All right. Thank you all for your attention.